That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And guys, he was here a minute ago, but he seemed kind of in a hurry. He wanted to go check and see what time the ferry was running. I didn't even know there was one of those around where he lives, but you know a guy for 20 years. You used to think you know him. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you back into our series on learning how to lose, titled In the Mourning. You can hear us discuss the ideas of this series at length as part of our Infinity War conversation from a couple of months ago. But this series is meant to help us meditate on loss as we navigate life inside a pandemic, giving even deeper resonance to our regular mantra of assessing what scares us to find what saves us. But I am getting ahead of myself because here at the Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain. Except for right now, when I explain that you can listen to the Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform, you can watch the Fear of God on YouTube, and you can browse the Fear of God on the web at thefearofgodpodcast.com, where you'll find episode archives and merch, including cell phone cases, t-shirts, campaign buttons, face masks. Be sure to wear them. Magnets, pillows. Read! Hey, buddy. Hey.
Hi.
There you are. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
I do believe in fairies. I do believe in fairies. I'm supposed to clap my hands 3 times. Is that what I'm supposed to do?
Wrong.
No, I think I'm supposed to clap my.
That is
I
not
think I
at
clap
all
my
the
hands.
fairy I thought.
You
had to check the times for.
Oh, I need to cancel. I need to cancel something really quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Well,
you made it.
Wow.
Weird.
Yeah. Now that you're back again.
Now that I'm back, yes, again.
Welcome to the
again.
show, brother.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm back. I'm no longer in Disneyland, unfortunately.
Doggone it. Speaking of Disneyland, Disney Plus has something really special happening tomorrow.
Oh, very excited for that.
It is very exciting.
My wife and I actually, about 20 minutes before we started recording, my wife and I were just discussing our plans to set aside some time and enjoy.
We've got a whole thing ready.
I know you went to
my
see
wife is making Aaron burgers.
Not Hamilton burgers. Not ham. Yeah, I mean no. Aaron burgers is funnier. It is.
Pardon me, gonna eat your Aaron burger.
You went to see the actual show
with pickles? Oh, sure, sir.
Yeah,
I did the actual show. Yes.
So, are you going to? Because I've heard there has been some light. I have never seen the show, but I've heard the soundtrack album beginning to end a couple of times. I know that there's, some a bit of adult content in there, not extremely graphic or anything, or really outrageous. But are you going to watch it with your daughters, or is it just going to be something that you and your wife are going to enjoy?
I was going to try to make a say no to this joke, but I couldn't conjure it too quickly there. Oh no, it will be a family affair.
It's a family
I figure
affair.
Just tear the Band-Aid off and just let the awkwardness roll over the room. No, I don't know. I've actually thought about. Well, it is worth mentioning that my kids have listened to the soundtrack multiple times and know it probably more in depth than I realize.
Gotcha.
And despite my best efforts to, kind of ward them off from say no to this, which is really the only most direct song. I mean, there's a lot of
sure
suggestive stuff here and there. We will probably not be using the subtitles though, so
fair,
a little too much. I don't know. I've thought about just checking the say no to this sequence just so I know,
what to say no
or
to,
not. This to determine if we're gonna like skip it or whatever. But
I gotcha.
I don't know, man. We're regardless, we're excited.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. I think that's the one question, and I don't know that my son would really be terribly engaged or interested in it. Maybe he would because the music is really involving, and it's very compelling, and it's just really easy to get swept up in it. So so I don't know, but we were having that same sort of consideration. We do not have the luxury of having seen the show to have some context for it. I only know through the album itself. That's
Yeah.
it. That's all I know. But yes, very
That's
excited.
exciting. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
I did not expect us to do that. We are jumping into a new phase of In the Morning, but before we do that, Reed, Beetlejuice, Hamilton.
Find a job. Let's see, business section. Ooh la la, what do we got here? Let me.
I was
Reed,
like,
I know.
Did he freeze? What that?
Yeah, that was the internet thing. That was totally an internet thing. That was not a sort of gears, grinding to a halt thing.
Sure.
So Reed, we've got a few items real quick. They are
Okay.
not brand new, but they are still just as important. Emails for stickers, you guys. We're going to just keep bombarding you with this ask. If you are listening to this and you have not submitted your email in order to get your sticker, please do that. We are trying to build the FOG database. Want you guys included on that for some future ideas that are percolating and germinating, and other words that end with aiding.
Illuminating.
Yeah, that. So go to the website, put in your info where it says subscribe, reply to the email it sends you. We will reach out for a mailing address and send you a sticker.
Sticker.
Reed, you got any business?
Yeah, so we have been soliciting for a little while. We have a little database building up of some audience-based what you watchins, what you readins, what you listening to. Some of those are fun. It's so fun. It's great to hear how people come up with that.
We're so stupid we didn't do this like 2 years ago.
I know. So so we do have quite a few, and you probably be hearing some of those along the way over the course of the next several weeks or whatever. But we do want more. So by all means, just open up your voice memo recorder. Just do some fun little thing with instruments, without instruments, with people, without people, with human beings, without human beings. Maybe it's your dog. Maybe it's your lizard. Like scratching against the. That would.
That's a little too far afield, Ray. I mean,
whatever. I don't know what people do and what kind of talents their pets have. But submit to fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. Submit an audio recording of you singing our What You Watchin', Readin', Listening to jingle, and we will do our best to feature it somewhere on one of those segments in the coming weeks. So by all means, keep sending in those watching, reading, listening tos. So
as a very last one here, guys, we will occasionally petition y'all for reviews, and reviews are nice. They're a bit ego stroking, to be sure, but in this new kind of fear of God era, what is super just valuable is y'all sharing about us. This is how how people find out about us, is through you guys. And if there is a pithy thing that one of us said in an episode, or if you are seeing the YouTube stuff that's hitting the channel there and want to share that, like whatever inspires you, whether it's silly and frivolous or deep and profound, we would love for you to share that out there so that we can continue growing this good thing we've got going here. So regardless, you are all awesome, and we appreciate all the energy and attention you've already paid to us in the 3 years we've been doing this. But that said, yes, so stickers for emails, audience, what you watching, and share alike.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to do a better job of exiting?
I mean, I'll give it a shot. So, Beetlejuice, we want you to take a break.
It's showtime.
I like that one. That was good. I love that song so much.
That's
like that song feeds my spirit a little bit.
One of my favorite things about that one, that's a really great song. And for those reasons, I love, there was a sequence of Hamilton remixes where some artists took some of the material and just did, I don't know if you've heard that album or whatever. The version that I think, oh gosh, I didn't prepare to talk about this, so I don't remember who the artist is on it, so I'm not even going to try to pretend I know. But the remix version of "Wrote My Way Out" was just fantastic. I know that Lin-Manuel Miranda was featured on that, but I don't remember the two artists that he collaborated with off the top of my head. And at the risk of saying the wrong ones, I'll just skip over that. But that was a great one. Right.
Well,
my way out.
The one, the most notable that I'm aware of, because it does bring me to tears pretty much every go around off of that album, is Kelly Clarkson's cover of "It's Quiet Uptown." It's just it's like church.
Oh man, it's wonderful.
Regardless, this is quickly turning into the Hamilton podcast. It's not even out yet,
I know. I haven't even seen it.
What you got?
So listen, I just want to say a huge thank you again to new friend of the show, Matt Ruff, for what a fun conversation.
That was great.
It was just great. He was so generous with his time and with his thoughts on not only his inspiration and crafting of his novel Lovecraft Country, which is a fantastic book, but also just some of the thoughts in general on the subjects that came up, and I was just really appreciative. We send a huge thank you again to Matt Ruff. We will absolutely prioritize having you back on as soon as possible, schedule wise. So yeah, if you haven't heard that episode, go check that out. And in that spirit, I think we have a little contest that we want to divvy up.
We're doing that now?
So yeah. If you'll give me just one moment, I'll bring in a special guest, and we will.
We'll go to a commercial break real quick.
Okay, yeah. So stay tuned right after this message. Right.
Hello, special Fear of God guest.
So I have my son here, and my son is going to.
Hello.
We've got the names in this little Ernest hat here of the people who shared on social media, shared the show or an episode or something on social media, and tagged us. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to pull a name out of the hat. I'm going to read the name. And then whoever it is, it's going to be a winner of something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, so they're gonna
winner of something.
They're gonna win. Yeah, what they're gonna win is an autographed copy of Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. So
I just got to know: are those Star Wars PJs? Did you borrow those from your dad?
He asked if those are Star Wars PJs and if you borrowed them from me.
I don't know if I borrowed
You did.
them. I just
You know.
have them.
No, I'm not that short. You
Regardless,
can see
those are
there's a height difference here.
styling jammies, and I want a set. All right. So,
okay. Are you ready? We're going to shuffle.
Thank you to all of you. While Little Man is doing this, thank you to while Little Man is helping his son do this. Thank you to all of you who participated in the contest to win a signed copy of Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. Let's see.
So
who
is this the one? Okay.
There it is.
All right. So this is the one. He drew it out.
The winner is
it. Oh, okay. All right. Just give it a shot.
Tony Fegan. Is that right?
Tony
Fagan.
Fagan.
Is it Fagan? Maybe.
I would imagine so. I had a buddy in high school whose last name was Fagan. So
All right. So
I know.
All right.
Thank you so much, Tony, for your participation in the Lovecraft Country competition. Congratulations. We will be getting your address so that Matt Ruff can send you a signed copy of the book. That's very exciting.
Absolutely. All right. So no, we're not going to draw more names. There's lots of other names in there. Thank you sincerely to everybody who participated.
Yes.
That was super a lot of fun.
Only one?
There's only one. There's only one winner this time.
It's
Wish
like
there
a
could be
Highlander.
more. We're going to send him.
All right. And back to commercial break.
So yes,
That's exciting. Tony
that is
Fagan,
very exciting.
Thank you so much, brother.
Congratulations,
And while
Tony.
while his name is in the air, Tony has a coffee company that he
does
think that he brews coffee, and
Mm-hmm.
I was not planning to look it up, but maybe I'll try to find the name of the company by the end so people can go check out his coffee and maybe buy some from him. Yay for listeners and winners and books.
So, speaking of business time, speaking of that,
Yeah,
I think we have a very special regular contributor to the show and to the Fear of God podcast community who has something really, really important that he wants to say. So
Yeah. So we're gonna send it over to one Mr. Steve Beckley.
Hello, Nathan and Reed. This is Steve Beckley, the Fog Continuity Guru, and the guest on episode 169, in which Donnie Darko was discussed. We didn't do a What You're Watching, Reading, Listening to segment on that episode, but I was ready for one. So here now is my Darko Tears for Fears inspired rendition that's been knocking around in my head ever since. I wanna know what you're watching and reading. I never found out what you're listening to. What you watching, reading, listening to. What you watching, reading, listening to. I wanna know.
That is legit.
It's so fantastic.
I love
That's
it.
great.
I love it.
That's
Not
great.
only did Beckley bring, excuse me, not only did Beckley show up and send a Whatcha Watchin' rendition, he patterned it after Tears for Fears, which has its own tie into the show itself. Like there's like layers on layers.
That's
Like
how
Beckley contains
rolls, man.
multitudes.
That's
He does. He does.
Oh, he does. He does. Speaking of which, he asked the question, and I have to affirm, I mentioned it on, I believe, the conversation with Matt Ruff. Now I have officially listened to the new Bob Dylan album, which opens with a song called I Contain Multitudes. So you either listened to that or that's just
welcome.
how good you are.
Nope,
Yeah.
that's-
No, thank you. So yes, and I can affirm it's one of his best albums. I love it. I think it's fantastic, and yeah, it's really, really great. Very
Read. I see. I'm gonna try to make a volleyball thing, like a teeing you up here, like I'm just, I don't speak sports, but I just keep handing you ideas. You should do a Dylan B-sides episode.
gosh.
I don't know. It might be just you, because I
No.
really.
I've got fellow podcaster and at least occasional, if not frequent, listener of the show, MJ Smith of the Real Perspective podcast. I think he's also a Bob Dylan fan. He and I have been messaging each other about that. I think I should roll in.
Do like a a bit of a retrospective, your personal top fives. Maybe top five, maybe top 5 songs, top 3 albums, and then you unpack the new one. Read.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Might bring my buddy.
Multitudes.
I might bring my buddy Mario Mojo Blue, the blues guitarist, on. We'll talk about. Yeah, it would be a grand old time. So just stay tuned.
Is that like
for
a person, or is that a Dylan reference?
No. It's not a Dylan reference. Although,
Okay.
no. So my buddy Mario, he and I kind of built the foundation of our friendship on our, at least partially on our mutual love for Bob Dylan. So yeah, there's lots of.
I'm glad
Yes.
that a love of Dylan is not the ticket to friendship with you, because we would have parted ways decades ago.
No, I have no criteria.
Right,
it's
I know.
Yeah. It's it does.
Well, cool.
Help, though.
Yeah, so so listeners, you heard it here first. If this doesn't happen, it's not because I didn't encourage Reed and give him full latitude, and
You're welcome.
Kind of
Yes.
go do it.
So can I share one more thing before you share
oh,
yours?
Goodness gracious. Yeah.
No, just because it's not long. I just want to sing the praises of my wife. My wife knew I've been having a stressful week. I've been having a hard time. And that's actually not a jokey, facetious comment. It's been a stressful week. My wife knew I needed a little pick-me-up, and she had gone to the store for a few things, and she needed to swing by Target to pick some things up. She wore her mask. She stayed social distanced, but she also came back with this, The Shining board game.
I love
this
that
delights
you
me.
started this with, guys, it's been a rough week. So what made me happy is my wife got me a game inspired by a movie about a man and a husband and a father who just loses his shit out in the wild. It's like, look out.
Exactly.
Riri, be careful, okay?
I'm telling you.
All work and no play makes Lackey a dull boy.
Yeah. So having only just recently been given this, literally just like yesterday, we have not had the chance to play it yet, but plan to this weekend, and that's very fun. That's the end of my little.
You're going to open it, and the rules are just like, with however many players you have, just stare at each other saying "Rad Rom" for like an hour until one of you snaps.
and the object is don't snap.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So very excited to dive into the Shining board game as well. So,
So I have a what you're watching and read.
do you?
I started. Now I'm not very far, but I did start. I'll tell it to you this way. Was ist das?
Oh, did you? Oh,
I
did
started
you?
Dark season 3. I did.
I've been wanting to, and I've been.
Well,
torn.
I'll tell you the quick and dirty version here is I start you're gonna love this. This is like so me right now.
I do love quick
I
and dirty.
started it. Huh?
I do love quick and dirty.
No. That's not what I meant by this is so me. But I started episode 1. And okay, so if you're just now jumping on the Fear of God bandwagon, welcome. But 2, we covered seasons 1 and 2 of Dark. Season 1, I think I speak for you, Reed, and I say both of us, love might be a strong word, but have very high praise for season 1.
Absolutely, yeah. Mhm.
And season 2 is not bad. It just definitely was a sort of step down in terms of overall appreciation and affection. So
some strong
we
moments,
really-
but yeah.
yeah, we really wrestled with, okay, do we end up covering 3 on the show at some point or just kind of let it be? So that's how I start Dark season 3 the other night. I was like, okay, let me just season 2 ends with, Alt Marta using her golden snitch to take Jonas to some other place. And so when it started, I got like 15 minutes into it. And this is the exact same thing when I talk about anthology books sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, here we go. It's like you're buckling up for work.
Sure. Yeah.
Like
sure.
that is what it started to feel like. And it's like, man, I don't know. Because there's a lot of heavy lifting that has to happen in that first episode, as you'd imagine. Like,
oh, sure.
And I got about 20 minutes into it. And I turned it off.
No.
With the possible note that I was like, maybe I just don't watch it. Not because because life's too short. It's like you're just bebopping around the time stream, Jonas, and I can't handle it. My brain, whatever. So 20 minutes into the first episode, get a little bored because I'm not sure how much I want to buy in. Oh, there's a new big bad. Okay, cool, whatever. And so I turn it off with the anticipation that I might part ways. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm easily swayed, y'all. I'm in sales. So let me go check out Rotten Tomatoes. Like what is the consensus? Because like movies, okay. If there's a movie I plan to watch and want to watch and have an interest in, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna sit down and watch a 2-hour movie and not consume stuff. But we're talking a 3rd season of a very high concept tightrope TV show.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, well, I don't have to do this, I can not watch this thing. So then I go look at the Rotten Tomatoes and the reviews are like stellar.
Oh,
I mean, like plus 90% for season 3.
Yeah, sure.
So part of me was pissed. Because like, doggone it, I really wanted just like a big goose egg or something. Just make it easy for me,
Sure.
So I was like, okay, fine. And in fact, other than just the numeric, some of the just headlines were very praising of season 3. So I dive back in. I am 2.5 episodes in. I haven't even looked to see how many there are. Presumably 8 or 10.
There's 8.
Okay. Wow. I've been sitting on that one.
All episode. I've been like, ask about Dark.
Yeah.
I am ready. I am ready with the episode count.
Now, I'm digging it. It's I don't totally know where it's all going to land, of course, but and it's just as I think I just kind of miss the intimacy of season 1, before it just like exploded. Because literally, Reed, in one episode, you're in 1888, you're in 2050, you're in another dimension. You're like, oh my God, y'all, like, how are we? And I love Lost, and it did a little bit of this stuff, but this is like, they just don't care if you keep up. They really don't.
Good luck finding out when this is. Like, we're just gonna show you pictures.
Recognize this person? Nope, not the same person. You know.
You know what we're gonna
Anyway.
introduce? Triplets. It's gonna be so fun.
There's a trio of characters that launched season 3. So yeah.
There you go. Oh my god.
Now, to its credit, something that does happen that I do like is they do pick up some threads that you might worry at the end of season 2 they're not going to follow because
Oh,
of
okay, sure.
events of the end of season 2. You do get back to relatively promptly.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah, overall, right now, as of 2.5 episodes into season 2, I am enjoying Dark season 3.
Awesome.
I'm it rather loosely because you kind of have to, otherwise
Yeah.
it's just gonna pop you into another timeline. Yeah. That's what I got.
All right.
That's
Well,
what I got.
why don't we let old Tears for Fears Beckley send us out again?
Let's do that. Let's find it. Cue it up.
I wanna know what you're watching and reading. I never found out what you're listening to. What you watching, reading, listening to. What you watching, reading, listening to. I wanna know.
That's
That's
classy.
so great. You know, your little head bob thing looked very much like Night at the Roxbury kind of.
That was fun. That was a fun SNL bit.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
Hey.
So we are starting a brand new phase. When we launch this with the preamble, prelude, prologue, whatever you want to say, of the B-side Infinity War, where we had a good friend of the show, Ian Olson, on to discuss.
Can you stay on brand and say friend of the fog?
Friend of the Fog? Okay, fine.
Go ahead.
Friend of the Fog.
There you go.
Ian Olson was on to discuss Infinity War, and then we moved into season 1 of HBO's The Leftovers. And the concentration on the films that we were covering in that time were about ghosts and ghost stories. And a lot of season 1 dealt with grief and dealt with the problems of trauma in sort of a post-cataclysmic environment and how you cope and how you deal with that. So we did that phase, and now we're moving into season 2. And The Leftovers itself kind of lends itself to different thematic focal points in each particular season. So in season 2, this focus is going to be on something like, it sounds a bit on the nose to say revelations. That's not revelations in terms of like just apocalypse, although apocalypse does mean revealing or unveiling. But it's going to be hinging on things that and ways that cataclysmic happenings or major life events can position you to learn things about yourself and certain things that are hidden underneath the surface, certain things you're not considering, certain realities you haven't come to grips with that begin to emerge and reveal themselves. So the film slate that we are moving into right now will feature 5 films. We're going to do 5 films this time around, 5 films which each have as part of their narrative thread a sense where there's a profound revelation somewhere in the story that sort of turns everything on its head, either for the characters themselves or for us as viewers, or maybe both. So that's what we are venturing into. So in just a moment, we're going to be launching this phase, season 2, of #InTheMourning, MOURNING, with a discussion of the first 2 episodes of season 2 of The Leftovers, and then we will have an extended conversation about Martin Scorsese's film, really probably his only film that would be classified as a horror thriller, Shutter Island. So are you ready to dive in and let the mystery be? So, yeah.
I would totally love to let the mystery be, and we will happily get to that. But I am curious, not to put you on the spot here, but something that just registered for me that I'd love to have you offer some input on. So
Sure.
So that it's clear, In the Mourning is this overarching series that is examining Leftovers as the spine, seasons 1, 2, and 3. Each of those, as you just outlined, seasons 1, 2, and 3 have their own sort of slice of what we would say is the purpose and intent behind the In the Mourning series.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. season 1 being this remnant idea, and the idea of ghosts, the idea of loss is very tactile and tangible in this current kind of global pandemic moment in which we find ourselves. And so I'm curious, one, to pat you on the back of just devising some of these inroads for conversation, but how, as you were in the mental process of devising, how would you connect what you just described of revealing about yourself that you laid out of this slate of films and connect it to that overarching In the Morning? How would you sort of articulate that?
So a lot of times what can happen is, and I do think it's really funny that it is a bit ironic that you're asking me this question, because I took to social media like literally 2 days ago, devised this whole big post that I was going to share and spit out into the world. Ultimately didn't, because I wasn't happy with the language and wanted to err on the side of waiting to speak rather than speaking something when I couldn't say what I really meant. But I feel like when the global pandemic kind of hit, it really brought to light a lot of things. It revealed things about figures in leadership. I don't just mean governmental bodies, but
Sure.
also in businesses and in homes and things. And I think it really sort of revealed priorities and where people place the full extent of their attention and what they view as truly vital and what's not truly vital, so that I'm not being vague or too nebulous
Obtuse.
about the thing. Obtuse. Is so like I've been thinking a lot. Now, this is the kind of conversation, I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but I love that you brought this up, because I think this is important. I've been thinking a lot recently about idolatry and idols and ways in which times like a global pandemic and the pressure that it puts you under and the ways it disrupts normality can force you to confront, or at least to reveal certain things that you've placed in your heart that might be considered idols. Whether that be, and I'm not merely talking about, because what sort of tipped me over is this conversation that I actively don't want to have right now, because I think it would just take away from too many other things, of like the statues that had been raised up as tributes, and should they come down? And obviously there is a direct connection where you talk about like, oh, tearing down statues and tearing down idols, like that just connected in my mind for purely superficial reasons. But then it did sort of begin to unpack, and I'm like, wow, you can begin to look at the way people talk and the way people think, and you can begin to see what represents a true priority in their life, whether that be they idolize history or they idolize safety. Going back to episode 5 of Fear of God, we talked about the idolatry of safety, or whether they idolize liberty, or whether they idolize, equality, or like there's all kinds of things. And all of these things may be, in their proper context, good and valuable and right and cherishable and praiseworthy, and they may be all of those things. But what begins to happen is, in situations like this, when we begin to position those good and right and great things as ultimate things, then things begin to get ugly, and suddenly you begin to watch your humanity dissolve in front of you, and it can reveal certain things about you. And ironically, I was not thinking about this when I built the sort of templates for how we would navigate through the leftovers. But it did connect for me that the word apocalypse, which is often used to mean like devastating or concluding, or like, a dystopian future sort of idea, but apocalypse,
or an X-Men villain.
Or an X-Men villain, exactly, and a so-so X-Men movie. But the but apocalypse really means like the unveiling or the revealing, and so the dots just connected for me. And there's a lot of thematic things that we'll get into with Leftovers when we cover season 2 as a whole. But there's a lot of things in Leftovers season 2, like you're going to hear a refrain of, people saying, I don't understand what's happening. And a couple of times somebody looks right back at them and says, yes, you do. You do understand what's happening, and how these things, these traumatic events sort of raise up revelations that we're in denial about ourselves, or that we're in denial about what we prioritize. And that's how it connected. There's this grieving part where we just sort of mourn what's lost, and we move into a place of coping or coming to terms with what we've lost. But then there's also a piece of it where we have to come to terms with what we have learned about ourselves and what we see about ourselves and who we are. And I think that is as vital, if not more vital, than the other piece of it. And so that's what prompted this focal point for going through season 2. So.
Appreciate you unpacking that, and hopefully listeners did too. Without further ado, Reed,
let's do it.
Now we find ourselves in Leftover Season 2, but not back in Mapleton, New York. No, friends. This time around, we find ourselves smack dab in the prehistoric era, at least for a moment, to then shortly thereafter find ourselves in one Jardin, Texas, which will become the place that we hang out in for pretty much the entirety of season 2 of Leftovers. And without further ado, we now examine episodes 1, Axis, and episodes 2, A Matter of Geography, of the Leftovers season 2. Read.
America.
Read.
Nathan.
Do people have the same level of investment in the TV show Leftovers as I do, which I can recognize and I can own? Maybe it isn't unique to me. I know you share similar levels of affection, but I also know it isn't for everybody. So I can recognize that. Setting that aside, I didn't know how much my soul needed to hear a bluegrass tinged, feminine vocaled hymn about the need to let the mystery be, set against imagery of joy and loss. I can't I couldn't describe it. I tried to describe it to my wife. I'm like, I'm failing. It doesn't, I don't know. It is too deep for me to unpack in a coherent fashion to how like a hot air balloon rocketed into the atmosphere was just the experience of starting season 2 and being reminded of that in that moment. Like the best imagery I could come up with of just, and I know I'm prone to hyperbole, but this is not that. Like the level of exaltation this ignited in me, it felt like a hot air balloon just being rocketed into the atmosphere of just like, oh my God, I had no idea how much I needed to hear song, these words set against this imagery, and it had a wildly profound effect on me. Just hearing the dumb title credit sequence.
No, I understand it. Yeah, so that's the first big thing you notice when you get into this one is there's because it's a completely different title sequence featuring the song called "Let the Mystery Be" by Iris DeMent, and it's set to, so listeners who watched it know this, but it's set to images of people. You said people of joy and loss because it's images of very happy people. They're all very joyful images. But in each of the pictures, there is the shadow of somebody who used to be there that's not. Yeah. And it's powerful imagery. It's really, really powerful imagery. And in many ways, and I'll use the opening credits sequence to express this. In many ways, The Leftovers feels to me like two shows. And it feels like season 1 is season 1. Like if you were viewing TV as a movie instead, season 1 was what it was and just sort of wraps up. And then season 2 is almost like a sequel to season 1, not necessarily a continuation of the same show, although it technically is a continuation of the same show and certainly of the same characters and
Right.
some similar themes, but it feels in many ways like a sequel to season 1. And then season 3, when we get there, feels very much like a kind of an extended epilogue to what we got in season 2. So I'll contextualize more of that when we get to season 3. But yeah, and a lot of that is rooted in like this completely new title sequence that kind of recalibrates what the show is trying to explore and say and do. Yeah, so I love it, absolutely. And so then when we go into the episode, again, Axis Mundi, which I believe it's a Latin phrase, means axis of the world. I, in my little looking, found out that it means the connection between heaven and earth. And so when we started, we don't have any of our core characters.
To throw a dark curveball at you, Axis Mundi, sic mundus est.
Oh, that's right.
The earth.
That's right. That's exactly right. So not only do we not have any of our core characters, we don't have the modern era when we open up season 2 of this. We have, this. You mentioned prehistoric. This woman steps outside of it, literally a cave woman, prehistoric woman steps outside of the cave where she's dwelling, and she's pregnant. She's about to give birth, literally. A huge earthquake happens, collapses the cave, presumably kills all of her fellow companions inside, and then she's trapped outside, where she then proceeds to have just some of the most horrendous sequence of things. Like she gives birth out there, and then she and her baby are trapped like in a rainstorm, and then she sees something in the distance like smoke signals or whatever, and so then she begins to traverse that way, but she's struggling to find food. She gets bit by a venomous snake.
Jeez, that's just awful.
Oh, it's terrible. It's awful. And then I remember, so what listeners may or may not know is I invited my wife to finally watch the show, and unlike when we went through season 1 on the show, I had not rewatched season 1 before we discussed it. And so now I'm going into this conversation, and I have rewatched season 2. Also am rewatching it now. So now I have some fresher context for the whole of it while I'm also revisiting it here. And when I showed that to my wife, I remember about 4 or 5 episodes in.
The cave woman scene?
Yeah. She looked at me and said, like, "Do we ever find out what the deal was with that cave woman?" And I'm like, well, not really, not in the way that you would think. So yeah. Immediately following that, I'm just moving through like some likes, dislikes.
Yeah.
My first couple here were introduced to Jardin, Texas, and to the Murphys. One of the early things that we see from John Murphy, the patriarch of this family, is that he clearly has some deeply rooted issues.
Goodness gracious.
First thing we see is him antagonizing a childhood friend who positions himself as a kind of a psychic of sorts. John's very skeptical of that, and so skeptical to a degree that his reactions are, we could say, extreme in terms of.
Well, and it quickly establishes he has some pathological history of animus towards the non-literal. Yeah, more or less,
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely,
and
absolutely.
It's really powerful.
And then I don't want to take up just this entire time. The next note that I have on here is just that Miracle song gets stuck in your head in like the worst way. It's like not a song I enjoy.
The chorus,
but it gets chorus. Stuck. It's pretty catchy.
I love Regina King. Goodness gracious, she's so good, and she's outstanding. She just kills it in this whole season. But welcome to the Leftovers party. I love, and this is just my sort of perverse way of enjoying things, like I just love that the whole first episode is nothing familiar. It's a new geography. It starts with a different era of different epoch rather. You know, so you got that, you got a new geography, you've got brand new characters. The only hint towards what we know comes in a very jarring fashion, but in a really fun fashion, which is at the church when pastor says, I'm going on leave, and we've got an interim pastor, and there's no fanfare whatsoever. All of a sudden, Matt Jameson is, you know, just this smiling Chris Eccleston, like, oh yeah, that's me, you know. and it's
a full 40 minutes.
Yeah,
it's a full 40
late.
minutes into the episode before we have any familiarity with it at all. It's a really bold storytelling choice, but a good one. It's impressive.
This will come back to haunt the proceedings of season 2, but in a way that it didn't register with me the first time I watched this years ago. Evie tells the knock joke about the broken pencil, and John says, broken pencil who? And she says, never mind, it's pointless.
Yes.
Which has a rich thematic Guilty Remnant-esque
absolutely
to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's more or less my broad notes on.
I just have two more
1.
things. Yeah, I have 2 more things to mention. I just had a little note where it said, few things terrify me more than scenes in films or TV when somebody sticks their hands down a garbage disposal.
Oh, yes. I felt that, John Murphy. That's me. I'm like, I know intellectually that I'm not going to flip that switch. Is someone going to run up, flip it on me? But I just don't know, you know?
No, I don't know. So I had that. I will say about John, this is going to come up more, so we don't have to unpack all this right now, but some of the authority he bears in the town and the actions he takes with relative impunity strike me as kind of odd, because there doesn't seem, other than the park rangers, there doesn't seem to be any specific law enforcement presence in Jarden outside of just, you know, the park rangers. So I wonder why he's allowed to do these things that everybody apparently knows he does.
Sure.
Without sort of repercussions to it. Like he clearly has tremendous weight of authority inside the town, to the degree that his validation or not, you know, causes the authority figures to just back off in some cases that will, you know, one particularly that we'll see in the next episode. And just in a few episodes, I mean. So yeah, that just strikes me as odd. It's going to come up again later in different contexts, but I just wonder, like, how did John establish this authority? Why does he hold so much weight? And I don't know that the show ever really sort of defines it deliberately. But then my last note on this episode is you pointed out that she makes the joke and the pencil and says it's pointless. Also, Evie's epilepsy. And then when she comes to, her first words are, I went away. And I just thought that was like, oh man, yeah. There's a lot of little lines in there that kind of point to what's going on. But that's a stellar opening to season 2. Episode 2 is called A Matter of Geography. So one thing that we didn't highlight in episode 1's discussion is that 40 minutes in, you see Matt Jameson. We mentioned that. But then about 45, 46 minutes, just a few minutes later, we see Nora and Kevin and Jill with the baby that Holy Wayne and Christine had, Lily. They all arrive in Jarden next door to the Murphys. And that's just that we hadn't seen them before, didn't know anything about them, and then they just arrive. So A Matter of Geography takes us all the way back into Mapleton and paints for us the picture of kind of how they arrived there in quick succession. You know, I always loved the opening of this episode right after they rehash for us the ending of season 1, where Nora finds the baby on the porch. And then it goes into later that evening where they're sitting down and Nora's going to stay because her bags are already packed. And Kevin admittedly is like, wait a minute, like, are we doing this? We don't really know each other. Like, what's going on? And I just love that scene where she's like, what do you need to know?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Like, what do you need to know?
Well, and it's such it's a bit of a break for Lindelof, but 2, it's a bit counterintuitive from a rules of writing standpoint, right? Like your typical trajectory is you need secrets, right? Yes. And storytelling is characters navigating the withholding or divulging of their secrets. And so what's really powerful about that scene now, sadly, secrets start accruing again.
Yeah,
Or
very quickly.
there's still some echoes, some hauntings of secrets there. But one thing I love about that scene is, in that moment at least, those characters are being as transparent with maybe even themselves as we've ever seen them. And it's just a
Yes,
really
absolutely.
powerful, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
You know, that refrain of "it's okay, it's okay,
Mhm.
it's okay" is
Mhm.
really, really lovely. This episode introduces a concept that will carry through the rest of the series. When, not with this specificity exactly, but when the MIT researchers are buying Nora's house,
Yeah.
and she's trying to suss out why they're so interested, and
Mhm.
she says, or they say rather, of people studying, it's to protect themselves in case of a recurrence. And she says, "Do you think it's going to happen again?" And their simple response is, "Well, why wouldn't it?" And
Yeah.
that's a really loaded scene that sets her on her
Mhm.
path,
Absolutely.
and for the
Yes.
series itself becomes this spectral
Mhm.
conceit, you know,
Yes.
of concern for these characters.
No,
Because one
absolutely.
thing, remarkably, you may have mentioned this and I may have zoned out. I apologize if you have, but the value of Jarden as a geography in the
Oh,
series is
no,
there's been zero departures there, and so
yes.
it becomes this haven, not just haven, but a national park, right? Like
Yeah.
it is an almost, not almost, but a religiously sought after location. And so,
Absolutely. We are the 9,261. We are spared.
wow,
It is
talk about
yeah.
idolatry.
No kidding. No kidding. And that's that's definitely going to come up.
What else you got for two?
So I wrote a couple of lines down that I think are just are really cool. The first one is what Nora says. So she's helping to pitch the tent in the backyard. They've gone into Jarden. They had rented a house from Mapleton to relocate to Jarden as a kind of an experiment. When they get there, they find out that the house has been burned down. So then, in a very impulsive and frustrating effort to continue their quest to make it into Jarden, Nora, who just earned a cool almost $3 million for the MIT professors who wanted to buy her house, drops $3 million sight unseen on a house in Jarden, in probably one of the first concrete scenes that shows us, yeah, we're not okay. We're not
Right,
okay
right.
at all. And so then when she's pitching the tent, because they temporarily stay with Matt and Mary, who are just staying in this kind of the garage next to the church where Matt is helping. And when they're pitching the tent back there, and she's interrogating Matt a bit about why he doesn't want to come and stay with them and all these other sorts of stuff. And then Kevin's like, "Look, he doesn't, Nora. It's fine." And then she looks at her, she's like, "You two bury a body together, and now you got each other's backs, huh?"
Yeah,
And I
that's
I
great.
was like, "Wow, that's wonderful." And then Matt looks at her, he's like, "You told her?"
Yeah.
It's great. And then the other line that I had written down, which has just tremendous more profundity to it, is something we have not explicitly mentioned yet, but did get teased at the end of season 1, is that Kevin is not only hearing voices like his father and causes him to put earbuds in where he cranks heavy music loudly, but he is also seeing Patty Levin, and she's, echoing things in his ear. And when they're about to go over to the house of the Murphys and hang out with them for the first time, she says, "Hard to tell if they're part of your story or if you're
That's
part of
great.
theirs." Oh, what a line. Oh, man, what a line. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's funny.
Yeah.
You just said something that is knocking around my skull here, and that's how you interpret Nora looking 3 million for this house being a signal of not okayness. And it's funny because I actually, for that moment in time, read that as quite opposite. Like
Oh, interesting.
I agree with you. It is a uncommonly wild choice to make.
Sure.
But we're in an uncommonly wild universe of this show, and there's a scene at the end of this episode where Jill of Nora says to Kevin, she needs to be here because it makes her feel safe.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Kevin's response is, and what if it's no safer than any place else? So I do think for a brief moment, like Nora is, and this will come up, and I won't unpack it too much here, but this will come up throughout season 2 at least. I know you're caught up on season 2 again. I don't remember everything past all this, but this notion of safety and
right.
to me, what that thread, that particular thread in these 2 episodes had a very strong resonance with the world right now. Like
Yeah, sure.
our need to just, my God, feel, because there's a difference between an idolatry of safety and there's and just being okay in your moment, right? Like
Of
those are different things. Like you
They
can
are. Mhm.
worship
Yeah.
the need to be there, but you
Mhm.
can also be the Nora who's just like, no, for this, what's going to quickly dissolve, but for this brief shining moment, Nora is okay. And screw money. That, like, what does money matter if,
Yeah.
however right or wrong, however rational or not, I'm in where I'm supposed to be, you know.
Yes.
And there's just a really powerful sort of,
Well, and also it directly ties to the thesis that the MIT professors give her when they buy her house, is they said, we think it might be a matter of geography.
right.
So they've planted seeds that,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's going to come up later, but they've planted seeds in her mind that, like, no, we think it's a matter of geography. So if you're the one who lost 3 of her family members, why would you not want to be
Sure.
in the town where
nothing
nobody
can be lost, right?
Yeah, nobody lost anything. And so, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's either way. It is an incredibly affecting sort of moment and vital to the journey that this character is eventually going to go on. I only had one other little note here that I wanted to bring up is, so Nora says something towards the end, because Kevin is seeing Patty, and that's really obviously disturbing for him, because in the early part of the episode, we didn't highlight it very much, but in the early part of the episode, he goes and inters Patty's body, and delivers it to the authorities, like kind of wanting to get caught. And the police officer asks him, like,
Are you trying to blow up your life?
Yeah, you trying to blow up your life?
Message.
So but Nora says, and again, I don't know how well you remember season 2, but Nora says, if there's something you want to tell me, whatever it is, I can handle it. And that, to me, it's like, you have the scene in the beginning of that episode where they told each other their deepest, darkest secrets, and it was okay.
Right.
They said it, and it was okay. Now she makes this affectionate and devotive sort of declaration, like, if there's something you want to tell me, whatever it is, I can handle it. Without, in case you don't remember the events, she's wrong, and she's not wrong in the sense of, like, she's deliberately being deceitful. She is not self-aware enough to realize that she can't handle it.
Right.
And we will discover, I won't tell all of what's going on, but you'll see.
Come on, Riri, back off the spoiler hints.
But you'll see, in the episodes we discuss, next week, just how on the edge Nora really is, and what a kind of a house of cards her general okayness kind of is. And so anyway, that's my final sort of narrative comment. We'll have plenty of time to unpack themes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to bring out from episode 2?
Only that has been the first installment of our prolonged conversation on Leftovers Season 2. In this case, episodes 1 and 2, where we're introduced to the Murphy clan, part of the population of Jardin, Texas, where there have been 0 departures. Come on down, but be sure you have your wristband. See you next week on TV Guideposts.
All right.
That was fun. Riri.
Indeed.
Read.
So,
got a movie to get here. So, I don't know if you remembered. We've got that to do too.
Yes. So we've spent a lot of time here, had a lot to do, but we're going to get into Martin Scorsese's film, Shutter Island. So I've got some things. I'm going to just sort of, you and I didn't have a huge chance to pre-brief beforehand. I'm going to sort of lean in on the fact that I have got some things to say about this movie.
Oh boy.
I'm not going to dominate the conversation, but
Yeah, right.
but I do want to sort of lead the way with a couple of trivial bits so that we can get the actual trivial parts of the conversation out of the way, and then maybe don't know how long we'll stay on likes, dislikes, and scares and stuff. But yeah, I think there's a lot to think about from what this film is trying to say in its last half hour or so. So one thing I should say, I'm probably going to say it on the other 4 episodes in this series, because we are dealing with films that in their nature have big reveals in them. That's part of the theme of this series. These are going to be spoiler heavy conversations. If you have not already seen these films by their nature do have reveals or conceits or surprises, not necessarily twist endings. That's not really the case all the time. But they have certain things about them that will affect how you view them if you know them beforehand. So if you haven't seen Shutter Island, then you need to consider whether you want to continue this conversation or you want to continue it after you have seen it. That having been said, the title is an anagram itself for truth and lies, which you may have seen in your research for trivia. What I didn't know is that at the time, this was the biggest box office success for Scorsese, both the biggest opening weekend and until Wolf of Wall Street, it was his highest grossing film, which I did not know. I didn't realize it was that successful. It was wildly successful, almost $300 million it made, but I didn't realize that was such a big deal for Scorsese's catalog. In a similar vein, and this is really the only intersection, except for maybe a B-side, that we would have the opportunity to talk about the work of Martin Scorsese. But completely by surprise, I just sort of looked up like, oh, what's the Rotten Tomatoes score on this? And I saw that it was like 68%, which is serviceable or whatever. But I looked through Scorsese's catalog, and this is actually only his second lowest scoring film. Like, to give you an insight into the critical legacy of Martin Scorsese, literally he only has one film critics rated on Rotten Tomatoes as rotten, and that was his debut with like 52%, which even that isn't like terrible in the scheme of things. But then
I mean, we've covered worse on here.
Exactly. But the next one up in the list would be Shutter Island at 68%. Everything else is like north of 70. Like and like everything he's directed. He's produced some stuff that has lower scores, but everything he's directed is like 70 and above. I mean, so Scorsese is one of the most vibrant and important filmmakers of the 20th century. And so this is his only sort of like horror thriller. The last bit of trivia that I thought you might find interesting is I discovered in my research that one of the pieces of music he used in this was a classical composition by none other than Max Richter, who has...
No, that's not where I thought you were going. Interesting.
Yeah.
Where I thought you were going to say is I saw a note about him sampling or something the Shining score
in the opening credits sequence. I think there's a very brief like.
Okay, so retell me the Max Richter factoid you just said.
So the score is culminated together with both traditionally classical compositions and modern classical composers, and there is a piece I did not find which one it was or exactly the sequence it's used in. I just know it's used in the last half hour of the film, and it's a piece by Max Richter, who listeners who may not know this is the primary composer for The Leftovers. So
yeah,
I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Well, the only true bit I had that I thought was fun, at least, was Mark Ruffalo, my boyfriend, as my wife called him, won the role that he plays in this movie by sending Scorsese a fan letter saying how much he wanted to work with him.
Isn't that great?
I'm going to try that.
That's awesome.
Hey, Martin, I'd love to be in your pictures.
Because that's what they are. They're Martin Scorsese pictures.
Yeah,
they're not
it's a
films.
picture. No.
It's
funny you say that, because this was the last one shot on film, right?
It
I
was.
think I saw that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He
just betrayed his medium.
You had said when this came up in our conversation on Black Swan, where Shutter Island was in the top 10 favorite horror films of 2010, you'd mentioned that you saw this in the theaters. Was this only your second time seeing it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's your general history on it? What's your feelings about it? Like history with film?
I've grown to not be sure how much I like you asking this the way you've been doing it lately.
Really? Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I'll reframe it in our
okay. All right.
apocalypse sort of conceit here.
Apocalypse Now.
No. I'm interested to see where you go. I don't like this film.
Okay. Yeah.
I think let me nuance that. I think it's masterfully made, and that's not me patting Scorsese on the back. Like I like Scorsese fine. I'm not a devotee or have a huge horse in that race.
Sure.
But just watching it, you're like, yeah, I mean, this is just excellent film craft, no question. The first time I saw it, I was put off by its heaviness by the end.
At the ending. Yeah.
And what's interesting is this time watching it, I couldn't remember exactly how it ends. I knew, there's some reveal waiting and
Sure.
it
Right.
recontextualizes stuff. And I had the recollection of role play is happening.
Yes.
I couldn't quite remember how it resolves. And one for me, this is for me. You asked the question.
Yes.
For me, I don't know that I think the conceit holds. It feels, I don't know that you're asking for all of this, but I'm giving it.
This is the reason I asked the question.
If you know the conceit, watching it this time, knowing there's a version of role play, not remember exactly how it all plays out, all I could think was like, I just don't think I believe this. Like I don't, even knowing when Kingsley says in 10 minutes, oh, I'm a specialist who utilizes this form of therapy. He's like, okay, that's what's happening. I couldn't even remember all of it, but that's what's happening. And just the further it went, the more I was like, man, this is a lot to buy in on for the concept. Now, to your point, you alluded to this a minute ago. To your point, I do think the last half hour is strong from a character standpoint. Sure. But by the time it got there, I was a little weighed down by just how much I was being asked to suspend disbelief that this would all work. Not that in movie it would work on this character, but as in, guess what? Right. All these people are playing this really long game on this one dude. Like that's a lot to kind of buy in on. And couple that with what, and we're watching The Leftovers, and we're a horror themed show, but what I find to be a deeply troubling and troubled story at work, that once its pieces get revealed, it's just really hard to be like, yeah, I like this, or I'm a fan of this. It really is tough to get to that point. What's interesting is, even in saying all that, I do think it's effective mostly. Yeah. I think it's well made. It's not something, this is a really weird way to describe this. It's not something that if I walked in and someone's watching, I'd be like, oh God, Shutter Island, or turn this off. You know what I mean? I know that's a weird sort of way to parse that, but I can appreciate it. I don't, I'm worried you're about to be like, gotcha. But because I'm worried you're role playing me. You're like, let me set Nathan up here for the long con here. Turns out I'm actually a therapist, Nathan. I don't know if you picked up on that the last 3 years.
Yeah, the fear of God has actually been a long, long sort of.
All those people who've been talking on the Facebook group.
I've been waiting.
I hired those people. And
oh my gosh, that's.
So yeah, that's a really long. Yeah, really long sort of response to that. This is why I don't know that I love you asking this these days. Because
you've just firmly entrenched why I will continue indefinitely to ask that question. So because
don't do that. That feels
no, because here's the thing is I feel like I get, and it's not manipulative on my part. I feel like because I feel like if you know what I'm going to say beforehand, or if you know where I'm going to come from, I feel like you'll hold back a little bit on some of like what you're thinking about or what you're feeling or whatever like that. And so, definitely not intending to be coercive or anything like that, but I do want a more authentic response, not a
Right, but what I
you
don't
know.
want is you to just then be like, oh, well, now I've heard your case. Now I'm going to pick
No,
apart what you're saying here.
no, not at all, not at all.
Do
I
you at
went in.
least do you? I'm sorry. Do you to reverse the question?
Yeah.
Do you whether you ultimately, and it sounds like you won't agree with the takeaway? Does what I'm saying make some sense?
Oh, absolutely it does.
Okay.
No, absolutely it does. No, absolutely does. My only defense of the conceit. So we should specify for 2 hours of the movie is a little over 2 hours long. For about an hour and a half, you think Leonardo DiCaprio is a U.S. Marshal who has come to Shutter Island to investigate the disappearance of a patient named Rachel Solando. And while he is investigating with his new partner, Chuck, played by Mark Ruffalo, while he's investigating this disappearance of Rachel Solando, he's tormented by increasingly heavy dreams. He has a fraught past, which he kind of alludes to. And then he's uncovering conspiracy after conspiracy on this island, culminating in a place to where he feels he has truly he's going to just blow the lid off this place, as he says in one scene. And he arrives at the place where he feels like he's going to get the big gotcha moment on all of the people who run this facility. And instead, he is confronted by Ben Kingsley, who is the doctor, who says, no, in point of fact, you are a patient in this facility. And these past 3 days have been an elaborately staged therapy session wherein you are allowed to act out your delusion in the efforts to bring you to sanity. So that is the conceit, that is the premise of Shutter Island, because the reason he is so delusional and the reason he is so insane is because he was a veteran and came back from the war with some heaviness. He married a woman who had severe mental illness. And because of his own personal issues, he did not address her mental illness to the degree that it deserved. And one day he comes home, being largely sort of coasting through his life. He comes home to horrifically discover that in her own delusions, she has drowned their children, all 3 of them. And in response to that, she compels him to murder her. And that's what happens. He has just witnessed that his 3 children are dead, and then he murders his wife, and he cannot cope. He cannot psychologically cope with having committed that crime and having gone through that. So he creates for himself an elaborate delusion in which he is a U.S. Marshal, which in the real world, he was a former U.S. Marshal. And so he creates for himself a delusion where he gets to play out this life of a U.S. Marshal investigating these conspiracy theories, while meanwhile all around him are people who are struggling to sort of navigate his tendencies. He thinks his name is Edward Daniels. So when George Noyce calls him by his real name, he goes off and beats him within an inch of his life because he's one of the most violent patients at Shutter Island. So the premise of this film is that the doctor has staged an elaborate sort of, like you said, role play to sort of try to drive him to sanity. And one of the really tragic things about it, and then I'll get to sort of my feelings and thoughts on it and history with it. One of the tragic things about it is that basically Ben Kingsley, who plays Dr. Cawley, tells Leo's character, if this does not work, they will lobotomize you, because they are going to take a permanent choice to do away with your agency and with your violent tendencies if this does not work. If we cannot bring you to sanity, you will be lost forever. And so so Chuck, played by Mark Ruffalo, is revealed to be his psychiatrist, and the guy that's been working with him for 2 years to try to do this. And so that's the premise of the film. You talked about buy-in and you talked about believability. I'm a little front-loaded on this in that completely before the film had been announced, I read the book by Dennis Lehane.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into the film first viewing, knowing what was going on.
Sure.
And it did flavor sort of, so I feel like it kind of, in the same way that went way back in the day when we talked about M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, and how I felt like knowing the conceit beforehand helped me to appreciate what was happening in the film more, because I didn't have to, as you say, buy in. Now, what's interesting about what you described is I feel like it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like your second viewing was lessened by knowing the conceit and feeling compelled that you had to buy into it more now that you sort of know what's happening. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. I think, but um, again, presenting these as just sort of observations, not so much hills to die on.
Sure.
As I've even sort of been processing it since this viewing, this is going to be a really weird sort of statement to make. It to me, it feels like it would work better on stage, because so much, like, this super random analogy. You mentioned earlier Night at the Roxbury, like an hour ago now. And you know that feeling when you watch, at least back in the day, when you watched one of those SNL movies, and you're like, this definitely should have never gotten the feature length treatment.
Right.
There's a little bit of that going on here where the production is so heightened and so kind of presented as naturalism that by the time that pivot occurs, is like, dad gum, that was a lot. The level of orchestration required in universe to execute this thing feels a little, this is going to be a strong word, feels a little far-fetched to sort of.
No, I don't. So I would probably wholeheartedly agree with you if not for two factors. Factor number one, they are on an island, so isolation is possible, and they can construct a bottle of sorts. It's an island, but they can construct a bottle of sorts in which they can manipulate the playing pieces more easily than they could have if this was on the mainland.
Yeah.
So that's factor number one. Factor number two, it is presented, although not heavily focused on, that Dr. Cawley is to his peers a bit of an outlier, that he has some radical ideas about treatment and about care, and that Mark Ruffalo's character, who we mostly know as Chuck, we later find out that his name is Dr. Sheehan, but he even says, if we fail with you, he says to Leo, if we fail with you, everything we've worked for here will unravel.
Sure.
Like if we and so to that end, far-fetched, absolutely. But do I believe that it could have been staged as, by some people who have the financial backing to sort of say, yes, you can try this experiment, but we're only going to allow this to go so far, and if it doesn't work, then it's over, and we're pulling your funding and we're pulling your patients, and they go back to traditional medicine.
Right.
So I can kind of buy in and on that level, but and maybe kind of the way we did Black Swan, I kind of want to, for sake of time, we've already had a kind of a lengthy episode, but also just sort of dive right in. Please, by all means, don't withhold any sort of specific things that you want to focus on. But like, there's so much in the last half hour that was said. I got to be honest. So what was interesting, Letterboxd is not like the ultimate standard or whatever, but first time I saw this, Letterboxd did not exist because it was like a decade ago. When I rated that I had seen this on Letterboxd, I gave it 3.5 stars. I was like, oh, okay.
And Letterboxd is 4, right?
5, actually.
Okay.
So 3.5 for me is actually like just it's okay. Like, it's fine. Yeah. Like, I enjoyed it. Like you said, good craftsmanship. Don't know that I think very highly of the film. So then when I was watching it this time around, I didn't remember what my Letterboxd rating was, and I was about to go back and give it a really high rating, which is my ultimate feeling about the film. But that was what was interesting to me is I was watching it and I was like, dang, yeah, I think, and this is where I'm going to affirm you and contextualize what I'm about to say. I think, as sometimes happens with these conversations that we have on this show, I think what I became captivated by thematically in the last half hour overshadowed what otherwise would have, been a takeaway from the film. I think I latched onto something that was in the narrative of the film, but I think I latched onto it, and that sort of just propelled me into feeling much stronger about the film as a whole than maybe the film deserves. But just statement after statement began to sort of rise up. First of all, he's reading his intake form. So Leo arrives at the lighthouse where all is begin to be revealed. and he's reading the intake form, and the intake form says this. I rewound it and wrote it down. It says, he shows no remorse for the crime because he denies the crime ever took place. He has highly developed and fantastical narratives which preclude facing the truth of his actions. And then when Ben Kingsley, the Dr. Cawley character, is trying to compel him into a version of sanity, he says this, oh my God, he says, your crime is terrible, one you can't forgive yourself for, so you invented another self. You've created, and this line, almost like emotionally, it knocked me over. He said, you've created a story in which you're not a murderer, you're a hero. And the ideas began to overwhelm me in the ways in which, and there's a couple of sort of low-hanging fruit subjects. I'm going to try to make this broader because it felt bigger and broader to me. The ways in which, and again, this is what we're talking about, this pandemic and what it reveals about us and ourselves. The way this pandemic is sort of unpacking the cognitive dissonance that some people have about realities, either personal or historical or social or whatever, the realities that they've adopted. And I will say this of myself, and I will say it of people that I know. We sometimes show no remorse for the atrocities in which we are complicit because we deny those atrocities ever took place. And we develop these narratives which preclude facing the truth. And so then in that moment, and then I'm going to get to the ultimate, the way the film ends, which just grounded for me my feelings about this film, is Leonardo DiCaprio goes through this phase of his life, and Ben Kingsley sits down at one point and it talks to him and reaches out to him and says, my concern is and I didn't quote, I'm paraphrasing these lines because I didn't write these lines down. He says, my concern is we had this exact same breakthrough 9 months ago, and then you regressed.
Right.
He said, we've been here before, and then you regressed. And that made me think of like pick a subject in
right.
society or politics or whatever, 2 steps forward or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and this idea of like, yeah, we've had breakthroughs before. We've had, moments of lucidity where we really sort of begin to grasp and we feel like we're moving forward, and then something happens and it just pulls us back. And I want to introduce, just so you have the totality of my thoughts and my cards on the table. There is an interpretive debate, like there was with Black Swan. I didn't really mean it to be this way, but there's an interpretive debate about what is truly happening at the end of this film. Because what happens is Leonardo is brought to clarity. He is aware of his crime. He's aware of his story. He's aware of his identity. And then he says, and I didn't write this line down either, so I'm paraphrasing. He's like, I murdered my wife because of what she had done. And he, with tears running down his face, I do want to say as a side note, holy cow, Leo DiCaprio. Like, what that man is able to deliver on screen is impressive in any degree. And with tears running down, with tears running down his face, he says, in talking about the death of his children, he says, I killed them because I didn't get her the help that she deserved. I killed them. And that's really what he couldn't live with, is he's recognizing that because I didn't take seriously what was happening in my house, my children were lost to me. And that's why he suffers under this delusion. Not because he although this would be enough, not because he murdered his wife for what she had done, but because he bears this burden like, I didn't take care of the problem up front, and because I didn't take care of the problem up front, this was the end result. And that's what he can't live with. So then he has that moment of clarity. We see him sitting on the steps. And then when Ruffalo sits back down, the character Chuck or Dr. Sheehan sits back down beside him, and he says, okay, well, what's next? Like, what are we going to do next? And then he says, well, what we got to do is we got to get off this island, Chuck. So that is when Leo apparently has slid back into the delusion.
Right.
And Mark Ruffalo turns his head and shakes his head at Ben Kingsley and basically like,
That's a rough little
oh,
share.
awful.
Yeah.
He's not sane. He's back in the delusion. And Ben Kingsley, you see it on his face too. Like, my work is going to fall apart. I wasn't successful. We failed. And so he nods his head and agrees to allow Leo's character to be lobotomized. But then, and if you weren't quite tracking on the wavelength that I was with, maybe this didn't affect it the same way. But then when he's walking away, he basically he says as he's walking, he turns back and he says, "You know what this island makes me think of, or you know what this island makes me wonder? Makes me wonder if it's better to live as a monster or to die as a good man."
Mhm.
And Ruffalo, who literally seconds ago is like, "Oh, he's delusional," suddenly is like stands up, is like, "Teddy," but Leo doesn't turn around. Leo keeps walking, and there's an interpretive element to this ending, and it's really interesting because I think it can be read both ways. There's an interpretive element to this ending that basically says, okay, you can read this as A, he is delusional,
Right.
and this is just a moment of lucidity that sort of fits in with the rest of everything else, or is he no longer delusional? And what he said to Ruffalo on the steps was so that he would be taken away and put out of his misery, rather than, whether he regressed or not. Like, can I live with this, or am I going to, just allow?
Right,
And that's the interpretive end. Either he slid back into his delusion, or he is purposefully walk. Because if you'll notice, he's walking forward with the orderlies, but they don't they didn't summon him or anything. They just appeared, and then he started walking away with them. And so I'm of the camp at the moment that he is making a choice to go and be like, I end this. Like, if I'm going to be sane, I can't continue like this. And so I want to,
which cements that, right?
what?
I mean, that I think there's more plausibility to that than you offered for Black Swan, or that you found for Black Swan.
Sure, of course, yeah. No.
But what I already think this is a pretty heavy movie, kind of maybe overly harrowing fashion.
Yes,
it's just brutal, but the knowledge of if that's a lucid Edward, right? What's his real name?
His real name is Andrew Latus. Edward Daniels is his moniker.
Okay, yep, pseudonym. If that's a loose Andrew, that feels like an even more dire end to me.
Yeah,
Does not feel like a hopeful end whatsoever. So
yeah.
in other words, either way you read it, I'm really thinking that concretely or consciously, but hearing you, well, damn.
Yeah, it's even more tragic, and I think that's the thing that when I was really sort of wrapping my head around this film and the ways in which we ourselves as people, and these films are tied into The Leftovers. We're making our way through the Leftovers series, and these films, are in dialogue with whatever, just as you and I are in dialogue with each other. So the ways in which characters in The Leftovers are layer upon layer, they are telling themselves stories to attach to that sort of give their life meaning, and then also they are hiding secrets, and there are things that are within them that they are not aware of. So there are the ways in which we try to force ourselves to cope with the realities we cannot face. That line from the intake form, just fantastical narratives that preclude facing the truth of his actions, and
I'm gonna throw you I was gonna hold while you unwound where you're going, but I want to throw in here because it's an added layer to what you're after, because I wrote down Kingsley's some of his lines too. And where you are finding where he says you created a new narrative. He says you buy into conspiracies, so any facts we tell you are refuted. And he ends, man, like this drumbeat of ourselves knowing ourselves and how we identify. He said, you do anything not to be latest.
No. Yes.
And
Yes.
latest is what? Latest is his true self. Like
Yes.
if we're
Yes,
we're
it is.
using this metaphor in this moment,
Mhm.
it's you've created a false self that you are pledging allegiance to rather forcefully. We're trying to help you rediscover your true self. And he says, you do anything to not be that.
Yes.
And I think
right.
that's it.
Yes.
That's the Black Swan adopt a role persona. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
we know that's ourselves knowing ourselves. Like I think a lot about, you said on Black Swan where you talked about encounters, like real life engagement you have with some folks of in conversation, and this notion of
Yes.
that's not you.
That's not you.
And
Right.
and I think what's fascinating and scary about that is like how easy it is to begin to put on those layers.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, takeaway for the moment is simply that extra level of depth of the sort of God character in this film is Kingsley, right?
Yes. Yes.
I've adopted this means to your health and sanity and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you keep doing anything you can to not adopt this?
Yeah.
And I do think that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, because the part of Kingsley's part of that character's premise is he wants Andrew Laeddis to go. That's Leo's character. He wants Andrew Laeddis to go through this delusion for one very specific purpose, so that he can see how impossible it is. He wants him to play the delusion out so that he can recognize that the delusion is merely that it is a delusion. So things like when he picks up the gun, he's like, this is my gun, and I know this is my gun. And he said, well, then blast away. And so then in a really effective,
jarring,
yeah, absolutely, he blasts Ben Kingsley and sees like blood spatter behind him, but Ben Kingsley's body strangely like does not move. And so then he looks back at him and he's standing there unharmed because the gun is just a toy gun, and I feel like what Kingsley wants to do is he wants to push this delusion to the point of absurdity. Like he wants to validate it in the efforts to undermine it. That's what's wild about Kingsley's sort of prescriptive choice here. Is he's like, we're going to let this play out so that it can be ultimately invalidated. But it is, in point of fact, the concept of the ways in which we will cling to call what I'm describing delusions feels pejorative, and I don't mean it to be. We will cling to things that are not the whole picture, that are not the true picture, that are not even our true selves, and we'll cling to them because it is easier than. I really did not intend for Shutter Island to have so many echoes back to Black Swan, but it is easier than looking ourselves in the mirror. It's easier than staring at who we really are and what we really are, to adopt the personas and to adopt, whereas in Black Swan 2 weeks ago, there were characters who were being pushed into roles by certain things. Shutter Island is about somebody who has embraced a role that they like better than who they really are. And the people trying to push them towards health are pushing them out of that. They are trying to, again, validate it, to undermine it. It's like agreeing with somebody so that they can hear how absurd it is, and following something to its extreme conclusion so that you can hopefully sort of unpack and dissolve the logic of it. And
I'm sorry to cut you off. You mentioned a minute ago, perhaps not loving the word in its practical use here of delusion. I'll throw at you, and it's a Kingsley word in the film, narrative. Like but I want to create a different firmament here too, which is to say, Kingsley also has a line here, and he says, "Wounds create monsters, and you are wounded, Marshall." And actually, that's not Kingsley, von Sydow.
Yes.
And I know it may seem like I just go look up Roar quotes before we record to be able to deploy them. I don't. I actually just finished another book of his, and some of this stuff is fresh. Wounds create monsters, and let's connect that to what you were just saying. Let's diminish some of the language there. Wounds compel us to reach for narratives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, just got to notice your internet is unstable. Just letting you know.
Okay.
So this Roar quote I'm going to, is he says, "The gospel is woundedness healed, not woundedness avoided."
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be damned, Reed, we will do anything
Yes.
to avoid our wounds.
Yep.
We'll do, you do anything not to be latest. We will do anything possible to avoid our wounds. And I don't even mean that in a criticizing, finger wagging kind of way. Like,
no.
It is painful to stare those things in the face.
Yes.
But if we can't move into and through those things and be in some form healed of them, yeah, we are going to not just become monsters, which again is elevated language, but we will perpetuate that in our relationships around us.
No,
This is going to seem like a random throw in here, and maybe we don't spend but a passing glance on it, and that's okay, but it's just pinging for me. I had this stupid, because so much of social media is stupid, but directly stupid kind of back and forth with a peer recently about a couple of disparate issues that all led to roadblocks.
Yeah.
In terms of the conversation. It was really disheartening. And I came away with this feeling. I was like, why are you trying so hard, this person, in the arguments we have in our head with others? Why are you trying so hard to keep people out? Why are you doing this? Like, what is the wound that you feel is that you are ignoring, that you're not dealing with, or inflicting them on other people? Like, you're keeping people from gospel healing because you got this glaring wound that many can see and you call righteousness, but is being used as that mirror to slice anyone who is not like you, and in the meantime wounding your own damn testimony, if we can use that language. But does that make sense? Like, it's
of course
to sort of see that play out, which sounds like I'm giving myself across. This is an experience I had where it was like I was wrestling through this feeling of just, it's like you bring up, oh, God loves this person deeply, beautifully. Oh, this person you're engaging with is like whack-a-mole. It's like, no, God loves these people. Whack. No, God, I think God really loves these people. Whack. Like, good Lord, man, why are you working so hard to keep people from God and love?
Absolutely.
And healing.
And I think that's part of the
random. Sorry there. But.
No. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. And one of the things that comes to mind, and it comes to mind so much, I believe I've referenced it on the show before, but it comes to mind nearly every time the subject of wounds and identity come up. I think very specifically about the moment following, and this is a biblical narrative, the moment when, following Jesus's death and his resurrection, when he appeared to the disciples, what did he use as the means by which Thomas could know it was him? He used his wounds. Like, his wounds were the way, and it's remarkable to me, and I don't have the means to unpack this fully the way I would probably like to. But it's remarkable to me that his resurrected self still had them, still had the scars. And I think there's a way in which we believe that if we still hold scar tissue from things, if we still have the place where it hurt, the crater, the hole where something happened, if we still have that, then are we really healed? Are we really restored? Are we really whatever? And I think that's something that we then try to say, like, well, then we have to get to a place to where it was as if the wound never happened. And I don't know that that's really the goal. I don't know that that's really what we're after. I don't know that we're after reaching a place where it doesn't look like anything happened. I think ultimately we're trying to reach a place to where we can all acknowledge what happened and be at peace with it. That we can all acknowledge this is it. And maybe that's, the two words are always tied together, forgiveness and forgetting, forgive and forget. And it's like, well, maybe, and I know this is a lofty statement, a lofty idea, but maybe the point is not to forget. Maybe forgiveness demands remembrance. Maybe forgiveness demands that and forgiveness of self demands that we stare it in the face and say, this is what happened, and then find a place to where we can truly come to a sense of peace about it. And that's hard bought. Don't act like I think it's easy. And certainly don't hear that in my language. It's not easy. It's never been easy, as John Locke would say. I knew it was coming. I knew you were thinking it, so I just had to say it. But maybe that's what real forgiveness is not can we all just forget about that and move on? No. Can we all acknowledge the thing?
Right.
And recognize that that's not what we want to be, and that's not who we want to be, and that's not how we want to move forward. That we don't want to do that. It does me no good to deny that I ever was selfish or angry or immature. It does me no good. It does me substantive good to recognize I had an issue with that. I had a problem with that.
Right.
And I have reached a place with some tools to move past that. And so in that messaging that, like, Christ is there and his resurrected self still bears the wounds, we ourselves need to recognize that the good and hopeful and true and right future that we may move into with scar tissue. We may move into it with wounds and bearing wounds that we inflicted and that were inflicted upon us, and that may be ultimately the hope and the path forward into sanity. Now, I will not deny that Shutter Island does not appear to come to that conclusion, but I watched that and I saw that film, and the theme just arrested my imagination, and it sent me spiraling down this place of thinking, like, oh man, if we could only just come to that place where Leo is sitting, that moment of lucidity. The most hopeful moment in this film to me is when he is sitting on that bed and saying, I did this thing, and I did this because I did not get her help, and so I killed them. Even though that is a devastating revelation and a devastating confession, it is the most hopeful moment of the movie to me, because it is the moment when he is most sort of at ease. He's not violent about it. He's not railing about it. He's not yelling at anybody about it. He's speaking it and being it and sitting there and grieving it, and that is what it is. And ultimately, his character, either because of delusion or because of a more tragic choice, decides he will not continue his life. That wrestling of live as a monster or die as a good man. But I think we ourselves, as a people, as individuals, as a nation, we have to reach an understanding that forgiveness may demand that we speak the facts and the truth about what took place, about what we did, about what was done to us, and express the reality, the painful reality, that moving forward means we may always have to have a piece of that with us, because otherwise, it's not wounds healed, it is wounds avoided otherwise, so
I really am resisting needling you about, like, well, we can't forget our history, but that's a BS piece of rhetoric. that is best left to the internet trash can.
Of course. Yes.
No, you have not really changed my feeling on the watching of this movie.
Sure.
But
No, I understand. Yeah.
I grateful for, and like I said when you asked, I mean, I do think those last 30 minutes are the strongest of the film. Like
Yeah.
it's
They're powerful.
when
Yeah.
actual sort of character work starts to happen, and would that we could all reach so sober a moment as he has sitting there on
Right, of course.
on that bed.
No, of course.
And this may seem self-flagellating, but a while back, this refrain was coming to me, this sort of personal mantra of stay brokenhearted. And like that feels really unhealthy. I understand that. But on a certain level, it is in the closing of our heart that these accumulations of pathologies develop, these layers of self-forgetting.
Right.
The open wound, because it is interesting. You something that pinged me a minute ago when you were talking about the Thomas story and the scars is the reframing of wound and scar, right? Like
yeah, right.
Like, I think there's a decent case to be made that these are no longer wounds, right? Like, and
yes,
that is a valuable takeaway for how we sort of assess. And anyway, there's a lot of places that could be gone here, but I do think more or less we've had our run of the island, Reed.
we've circled it, and now it's time to catch the ferry back to the mainland. And
please, quickly. I don't miss that ferry.
And yes, and I will say, like, the even critical assessment, 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, and largely positive reviews on like IMDb and stuff like that. But I think, in general, it was well received. But it's definitely heavy, and it's definitely like a gruesome and a bit of a grim viewing experience. I hope listeners do. I know we haven't dug into a lot of the specifics of the film, like likes, dislikes, and fear, but I love when we get to have a conversation like this. I hope you do too. I hope our listeners do. I feel vitalized when we get to unpack these kind of things, and this is I think Shutter Island, to that end, can provide some opportunity for reflection in that. Is it a little bit too long? Maybe, but is it exceptionally well made? I think it really is a very well crafted story. Scorsese is just an incredible filmmaker. So you want to go to the fog meter? You ready for it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so the fog meter is our very specific metric of fear and God. We measure every film we cover on that scale. I'll go first this time around with fear, with the scares in the film. It is difficult to stomach the visualization that happens in the last 30 minutes of what has happened to his children and what takes place with his wife. There are some creepy moments, like his journey through Ward C, and like there's some general and more traditional frights to it. But on the basis of those last 30 minutes alone and how dreadful and horrific that is, I'm going to give the fear factor an easy 8 on this level, on those playing field alone.
Something I've thought about since watching this was our conversation on Dr. Sleep and the events in the middle of that film with Jacob Tremblay's rather pretty graphic and troubling murder. And I think in assessing these things and why I would rank Shutter Island's scare factor so high is Dr. Sleep is pretty clear that that event, though tragic and terrible and pretty troubling to behold, is not what the film is about. And by its placement and by its relative, kind of blink and you miss it in terms of its relevance to the film. This movie is about this event.
Yes.
Very much so. And so the weight of it is much, much heavier because of that. And is just, it's very harrowing to watch that last run. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying an 8 for the scare factor. I'll do the God factor here. I mean, I think that I'm going to give it a I'm going to give it a 7 because you've convinced me it's there. And what is there is pretty substantive. So it does not feel like just sort of patting you on the back to rank it a little higher than I might have otherwise.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I will say, I think I'm going to join you in your 7, because better or worse, I think this is a film that is about its ending. So not only are the last 30 minutes sort of the most harrowing and the most compelling, but if that ending does not work for you, the film does not work for you. Like I really feel like it's all sort of baked in there, even substance wise. And so for me, I gleam a lot from clearly gleamed a lot from that idea where again, just this time around, it just ignited my imagination and prescience for our current times and for self-reflection and everything. So landing at a 7 there for me as well, because again, if that doesn't work for you, I don't think anything else will. But definitely a lot to latch onto if you're behind that. So that means that we give Shutter Island, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Kingsley, Mark Ruffalo, and a host of others, 7.5 out of 10 on the fog meter, which is a pretty that's a solid ranking. But I mean, would you? And I know you have complicated feelings about it. Would you recommend Shutter Island?
No.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Again, it's a really weird hair to split. It's not a wasted viewing experience, but to me, there's some tediousness about the plotting that, coupled with the sort of, again, I can be forgiving, kind of far-fetched nature of the narrative at work, coupled with the extremely harrowing nature of the end, just kind of formulates to a no, I don't. I think there's better ways to spend my time and get similar stuff out of it.
Gotcha. I, for myself, it would be a qualified recommendation, so I do recommend it. But I was even like kind of nervous because my wife wanted to watch it with me. She had seen it and she, had enjoyed it the first time through, and understandably so. She can sometimes feel a bit of sensitivity when things in films happen to children specifically, but was able to keep some distance and appreciate the film for what it was. So I do think it's a qualified recommendation. I think your notes about the plot are reasonable and worth evaluating, because it is a big ask. At the same time, Scorsese just knows what he's doing when he's making a film, and so to that end, I think that's why it's not a wasted viewing experience. Even if you walk away and ultimately go like, I didn't really care for that. It's just Scorsese's just too good a filmmaker not to be captivating and compelling in a certain degree. So qualified recommendation from me. And that puts episode 1 of season 2, phase 2, if you will, of #InTheMourning in the books. And so next week we are going to be continuing with this trek. We're going to be looking at a much lighter film, not a comedy, but definitely not as harrowing as Shutter Island. We're going to be looking at the film by Kenneth Branagh called Dead Again, from, I believe, 1991, early 90s. Sir Kenneth Branagh. Don't forget. So yes, that is the film that we're going to be covering next week. Dead Again, directed by Sir Kenneth Branagh. And we are going to be, of course, covering episodes 3 and 4 of The Leftovers season 2. So acquaint yourself with that material. Join us back here next week. Nathan, as always, thank you very much for having these conversations with me. What was that? You're breaking up a little.
It's a pleasure, my friend.
Oh, thanks. Yes, likewise as well. And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and for listening. As we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week.
Amen. See you guys.
No. If you're going to be silly, that's going to be different. Go step back. You can be a little silly, but don't be your version of silly. I need like...
If I had a nickel for every time someone told me that, you'd be silly, but not
your version of silly. Okay.
Rein it in, Rouse.
All right. So I'm gonna come back in and
Okay.
all right. Hey son, can you shut the door?
Will someone in the booth cut to commercial?
Please quick, cut to the commercial. We're not ready for this. We're not ready for it. Oh.
Whoa. All right.
Wow. Okay, shut the door for me.
It's intensity in the Lackey household.
You know, this is what happens every single night when we're approaching it.